Welcome in, everybody. Michigan State Spartans Live. I am your host, Ryan Elke. It's a beautiful day to talk about Spartan football as we are eight days away from kickoff. 8 days from now, hopefully we'll be feeling good because it'll be about end of halftime in Spartan Stadium. And hopefully it's a big lead over Toledo. And it's kind of what I want to talk about today is what do we need to see from Michigan State in week 1 to just to feel good about things. Just to feel a little bit better about the Michigan State Spartans this year. And what specifically? Cuz I know what we all want to see. We all want to see a 60 to nothing drumming over the Rockets, explosions, go Jonathan Gannon, pew 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 pew. We want the fireworks going off. But what are some other things that we just really need to see to say, all right, things are things are sticking, things are looking good. Pat Fitzgerald, some of his message has stuck. So we'll dive into that and just kind of some of the numbers I was looking at of specifically what I want to see. So, welcome in everybody. Michigan State Spartans Live here on the Voice of College Football Network, live every Tuesday, Thursday, 9 p.m. Next week, we'll have the start of our post-game shows. So be patient with the post-game show as I believe for home games, it'll be when I get home from the game. So I'll have, if you follow me on Twitter, Ryan EL_key, you'll be able to see some post-game videos, some sounds from the players and coaches after the game. So hop over to Twitter there, give a follow. I'll bring up some of the videos up on the show as well. We can dive into that. But post-game shows start next week. So excited for that one and just excited in general. We are 8 days. Week 0 starts this week. Yeah, I see exactly when the first game is. I know I did this last week. First game is, let's get out of top 25. Let's just go all FBS Saturday. So Saturday is our first taste of college football. Well, we have the big game, North Carolina, TCU. USC is going to be in action. We have NC State, Virginia. You have a MAC matchup between Eastern Michigan, Sacramento State, Stanford, Hawaii. So we even have a little late night action, 10 p.m. on Fox, UNLV, Memphis. So we get a little taste of college football this weekend and in week 0. So I kind of like the little week 0 taste. Just because it's a little college football in our lives, high school football starting up. I believe games started tonight. Had some games start tonight. I'll be calling a game tomorrow. We call them Clarkston South Lyon. That's happening down in Ann Arbor at the Big House. So I'll be down there tomorrow night to see Clarkston start their season. So if you want to watch little Clarkston football, Clarkston Community Schools District YouTube page, you can follow along there to watch some Clarkston football this season. But we're more excited for the Michigan State Spartans. They're 8 days. And touch on some news and notes before we get started. Of course, we had the Big Ten, the SEC, now I believe the ACC are trying to ban players coming back from their pro contracts and coming back into college. Of course, there's one obnoxious judge today that says, hey, if a player tries to do this and someone says no, come to court. And it's what I say, can we just let common sense prevail? And, as for some players that are close to us that have, rejoined the ranks, like Jackson Kohler to BYU, and announced today. Trey Holloman's going to Grand Canyon. I saw, I think it's on 3 posted like Kohler in his Utah Jazz summer league jersey, like, oh, he's transferring from the Utah Jazz to BYU. It's like he was on an Exhibit 10 deal, a summer league deal that's not even a full real contract. So that's why Kohler didn't really violate these new rules. And with the injunction that he was a part of, he's still eligible. Same with Trey Holloman. So they'll still, as of now, who knows? It seemingly does change every day, and seemingly some lawyer in some college town wants to try to fight it. So their favorite college can get some guy who has not played college basketball in a few years. But we are at the point too where actual games will be played, and we'll kind of all forget about this nonsense, right? Kind of let it all skip over until a team tries to bring someone mid-year. Yeah, I think that seemingly that's where it's going to go. That we'll hopefully all kind of forget and enjoy the football season before some team tries to add some guy that will probably be cut this weekend from the NFL teams. But what else was I going to touch on? I felt like there was one more thing I wanted to say, and it's just blanking me at the moment. I'm sure it will come back to me, but yeah, we don't have to worry about that anymore. Actual games will be played. And your MSU Spartans, Michigan State, they are 8 days away. Take out Toledo. I forgot this game starts at 8 o'clock, not the usual 7. I was thinking 7 o'clock as normal, but it is 8 o'clock on Friday on FS1. And by the looks of it, looks like the weather is actually going to be pretty nice for game 1. I'm used to that 7 o'clock tip off on Friday night, but it is an 8 o'clock tip or kickoff. Still in a little bit of basketball mode, saying tip off. Kickoff, 8 p.m. kickoff Friday night for Toledo. Drop in the comments too as well. What do you want to see out of Michigan State game 1? And if you want to expand it to games 1 and 2, I'm sure we'll talk about, we'll expand more on this after we, get some actual film on game 1. But what do you want to see out of this team? What's the one thing, whether it's a rushing attack, explosive plays, passing, the block, like, does it have to be offensive? Like, what's the one thing that you are like, hey, I need to see this to give myself, to fulfill part of that offseason hope I was feeling? Because I thought it was going to be, originally, I thought it was going to be the rushing attack for me. I was like, hey, I really need to see them have good rushing numbers, feel good. But the last 2 years, like under the Jonathan Smith era, their rushing numbers have been fine in those first few games. Last year was 44 carries for 181, just shade over 4.1 yards per carry. Game 2, 35 carries for 150 yards, so 4.25. And then again, so what was it? Prairie View, 174 yards off 33 carries, well over 5 yards per carry. So I don't think it's the rushing numbers for me after kind of re-looking up those numbers. And of course we had with Michigan State's schedule, it's always, a MAC team, Power 4 team. And then this year it's another MAC team. It's always some lower level conference team. It seems that's how Michigan State kind of consistently builds their non-conference schedule. This year, who knows what that Notre Dame game will be? Is Notre Dame coming in, top of the charts of the championship odds, returning a lot of players, CJ Carr's quarterback. But I think the number for me, and here we got a comment here, dominant run game and special teams being competent. Dominant run game, yes. I think that's what we always want to see. Special teams competency, 100%. definitely need to see that. And with LeVar Woods coming here, like you expect a big turnaround on just how our special teams is ran. It's just, especially with how good of punters we had, just how bad our punt team was. Like looking back at the Iowa game, how like the last few seasons, how special teams has costed us, and that's just one example of a game where it's cost us. Um, it special teams, it's a third of the game, whether you want to value that third or not. As you've seen with Michigan State over the years, it has cost them games. In the case of the Iowa game 2 years ago, it cost them a bowl game. Like, special teams might have been, you know, an underlying issue of what really, like, not what really cost Jonathan Smith his job, but if he had confident special teams, what would Michigan State's record have been the last 2 years? Not much better, but a little bit better, and might have survived a year three. Thankfully for us, we don't have to deal with a year three for Jonathan Smith. We get year one and Pat Fitzgerald. And I think the number that I think a lot of people want to see that has just been non existent over the last few years is that we want to see the sack numbers up, especially in these early games, especially it's Toledo and Eastern. We want to see this defensive line impose their will on someone. Last year, through the first 3 games, he had 6 sacks. 4 sacks in game one, 0 against Boston College, just 2 against Prairie View. And then, or excuse, Prairie View is 2024. Keep making that mistake. But as for last year, it was Western, and then Youngstown State was the game 3. So 4 against Western, 2 against Youngstown State, 0 against Boston College. Boston College, though, was running kind of a quick pitch offense of, 1, 2, 3 ball. They wanted to get that ball out quickly. We remember that game fondly. As for 2024, 2 sacks against Prairie View, 1 sack against Maryland. There was 7 sacks against FAU, but as if we remember that game in Jonathan Smith's first game, it was Cam Fancher running the ball. He had like 23 carries. When a quarterback gets tackled behind the line of scrimmage on a run, it counts as a sack. So 7 sacks in that first game. 10 sacks total in the first 3 games of 2024. Just 6 sacks total in the first 3 games of 2025. What I want to see out of this team, I want to see that defense take that step up, but I want to see the defensive line set the tone, because that's something we've been missing. Like whether it's sacks, whether it's forcing turnovers as well. It's something that's just been non-existent for this MSU team in a few years. Like even in those first 3 games last year, we had 4 turnovers. 2 interceptions, 2 fumble recoveries. In the first 3 games of 2024, we had 4 interceptions. Like I want to see Michigan State's defense, just especially Toledo and Eastern, set the tone, and let's get into the mollywop situation of these games. Because even like Western last year, was it 26 to 6 was the final score? 23-6 was the final score. Youngstown State 41-24. Nothing to write home about. Youngstown State, getting a late touchdown there, but it's again a 17-point win against Youngstown State. Not good enough. A 17-point win over Western Michigan can't be good enough. So for Michigan State, what I need to see, what I want to see, what I think we're all craving to see is this defensive line just show up and bully some people. Now, we may not be able to bully our way into the Big Ten with this defensive line, but for sure as hell, we should be able to bully some MAC teams. Like, and that's what we've been just missing the last few years. Whether it's the talent, whether it's the depth, whether it's the mentality, like that's what we need. And so hopefully, like that's what we're gonna get from Pat Fitzgerald, from Joe Rossi, from Max Bulla, is that mentality of to just when you have these teams here, is to not make it fun for them, is to hate it, the full 60 minutes of the game. And so at the fourth quarter, we can all enjoy our Friday night a little more. And, we're seeing some backups play, we're seeing some freshmen play instead of trying to sweat out and make sure our defense can hold this team to a nice number so that, you know, they're not getting back into the game. Like, I want that mentality out of this Spartan team this year. At least the first two. We know what's coming week 3 for Notre Dame, but let's at least enjoy the first 2 weeks of the season. As I said, I want to see sack numbers. I'd love to see, a dominant run game, but I also love to see some explosive plays on offense. I love to see what this wide receiver core is going to, how it's going to work out. Who's going to be, you know, Alessio's favorite target the first 2 games. I want to see established connections between quarterback and receiver. So I think we're all very comfortable with how the run game sounds. I would just say sounds at the moment. 'Cause, we haven't seen them in a game, but like we're excited to see Cam Edwards. Like he has the stats behind his name that he's a good running back. The offensive line bringing in those people, Morowski, Sharp, Fraley, like getting Connor Moore back. Like we're comfortable with the offensive line. I think we feel like the run game is going to be fine, but let's see Alessio establish these connections with these wide receivers that outside of Krishan McCray, we don't know a whole lot about. Like Rodney Bullard is eligible. Great. What do you have? 4 catches last year. Yeah, he had the one big touchdown against, was it Nebraska, I believe. Who are the other wide receivers that are stepping up? Who are the names that we're gonna like that we're gonna point like, yeah, another Courtney Hawkins product. So that's what I'm dying to see 8 days from now at MSU's kickoff. Um, is just that defensive line establish that bully mentality and make it a living hell for these MAC teams to not make it fun. Because we're going to go on the rest of the season, and while I think there are wins on this schedule to be had, we play Big Ten football. We're not at the level yet of bullying Big Ten teams, but we should sure as hell be at the level of bullying these MAC teams, and at least the lower Big Ten teams on the schedule, because that's what's been missing from Michigan State the last few years is just that tenacity on defense, and I mean tenacity between the whistles, because that's another thing we want to see some more discipline. And with Pat Fitzgerald, I don't think that's a concern for any of the fans here that will have, will get out of hand of playing undisciplined football. But, let's just get to a point where, we're doing post game 8 days from now and, we're having fun with it. We can nitpick some things. How fun would be that is just to be be a little picky in our post game, you know, review of the game. Like, how awesome would that be instead of talking about a whole mess of problems we got to deal with? So I think we're all getting a little antsy. I'm getting a little antsy as we approach this season, as we approach this football season in general. You know, for some of the parents out there, I'm sure your kids have already played games. I know some high school games in the state of Michigan we're playing tonight, and you know we have games tomorrow as well, and this weekend. So you know, football is here, and we're all at least we're anxious for it. In college football, we get a little taste this weekend, but you know we still have a whole another week until Michigan State, until like that pit in our stomach is really back. So I was just thinking about it today of like what I really want to see, and as I was digging in the numbers of just of Jonathan Smith teams of like, so there one comment said, "We want to see a dominant run game," but like early on in the season of the Smith era, is like we saw good run games, and like we saw some explosive playmaking from those Jonathan Smith teams. Like you know, the second game of the Aiden Childs era, like he goes out, throws but 360 yards, you know, throwing bombs to Nick Marsh. You know, like we had the electric Boston College game last year. Like we saw some big play capabilities. Like we saw an established run game. But what we haven't seen and what we hope will change under Pat Fitzgerald is that defensive line establishing the game and establishing and setting the tone. And you know, I think we all, us Michigan State fans, at least me in particular, you know, through the first year plus of Joe Rossi being the DC, you know, we didn't feel that great about him. But as things kind of lost control last year, we saw a little bit more competency from the defense. We saw Joe Rossi with a little more intensity, and that's what that team was lacking of the last 2 years was intensity and accountability. And so to kind of double, triple down on it, bringing in Pat Fitzgerald, bringing in Max Bola, like is to set that defensive tone again. And that, you know, I could sit here and say it's the defensive line, but it's also the linebackers as well. It falls on our secondary as well. Like, hey, can we get a coverage sack? When's the last time we got a coverage sack? But also, like, let's remain healthy as well. It also feels it's been 3 years since we've had a healthy DB room, and we're not playing, you know, walk on freshmen that just moved into acres. Like also seems that's been an issue is just staying healthy enough on defense to give them a chance. So I want to see his defense really set the tone here for Michigan State. And also for Notre Dame, the Notre Dame game week 3, which we'll talk to our friends over at Notre Dame, Voice of College Football Network, week of, you know, Notre Dame, as we've seen the last few years under Marcus Freeman, they're prime for one dumb game early in the season. They're prime for always just one dumb game. You know, a couple years ago, Toledo had their shot before the refs jumped in. We know how that feels, you know, refs jumping in and changing a game at Notre Dame Stadium. Then it was NIU was 2 years ago. Last year they started 0-2. Was NIU last year? I think it might have been last year. But Notre Dame, that was 2024. So that was 2 years ago. So Notre Dame's due for a dumb game early in the season. So why not us? but seriously, like we want to see where, you know, that Spartan dog mentality back on this defense. Like that's all what we've been craving for is that intensity back for Michigan State football. They're the offense. I feel okay about. I feel like our run game is going to be good this year. But if we see it, great. We see Cam Edwards start popping off big runs. If we can mix in a few other running backs, we see Alessio establishing some favorite targets. Which wide receivers are making plays? Which tight ends are gonna rise up and kind of see, especially out of the receiving room, who's going to be playing. Tight end's been there's been some nice reports out of the tight end room. The wide receiver room, it's haven't heard too much about. It's whether or not Bullard's going to be eligible, which he finally is. I feel like it's Krishan McCray, and we'll see. So that's another thing to watch out for Friday night. Of what I want to see too is, you know, which wide receivers are going to step up and make a name for themselves and earn more playing time. As we should see it. We have 2 weeks to at least get the baseline set for this team, especially for those starting spots that we may not know at the moment who's 100% settled in. And as for this defense, like let's set the tone. Let's reset the tone of what Michigan State defense is. Because it's been a few years since D'Antonio's been here. Because as we even during that magical 2021 season, it was that defense was nothing to write home about. like it was nothing. It was nothing great. Like the offense was saving the day every single week. So we need that intensity back. We need to set that tone. We need that Spartan dog mentality back on defense. No fly zone mentality back in the secondary. As bring back the linebackers that, early in the D'Antonio era, I called them the no-name linebackers or the plain name linebackers because it was like Eric Gordon, Adam Decker, Greg Jones, like the most creative player names you could think of that were just stepping up and just filling the role and doing a hell of a job doing it. We got Jordan Hall. We could throw him in the plain name linebacker gang of the creative player name. So that's what mostly I want to see is the defense setting a real tone for the season to show that Michigan State football is back. Because the years that we have had great seasons, 2021 is the outlier, but everything else, it was set with that defense mentality. It's getting sacks, putting the quarterback down, getting turnovers. Let's have some fun next Friday night where we're hitting the quarterback. We're all yelling ball, 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 or cheering for interceptions, and that's what I want to see. I want to see the defense have one hell of a game. Is Toledo, we're breaking in a new coach. Toledo's breaking in a new head coach as well. We'll dive more into him next week in Toledo, but let's make it not so fun for the Rockets, who've enjoyed quite a bit of success over the last few years as Jason Candle moved on to Connecticut. And let's put a little more fear of the teams that are traveling up to East Lansing. So I think that's going to be it for tonight. I thank you all for joining Michigan State Spartans Live here on the Voice of College Football Network. I'm your host, Ryan Elke. Follow me on X, Ryan EL_key, or we still call it Twitter. I don't mind if you do. I still do majority of the time. Follow me on TikTok as well. Postgame Walks, Elke, EHLKE. As you can see on your screen, you'll see my postgame videos, of what's being said postgame from Pat Fitzgerald, the players. You get a quick postgame recap from me before we jump on here for the postgame shows. So next week we are dialed in as it's game week. We'll have shows Tuesday, Thursday, and then post game. I'll give a heads up post game of roughly when we'll be live, and we'll go from there. Join in on the party, and let's enjoy week 1 of football. We have week 0 this week. Enjoy week 0 of football as we prep for week 1. So thank you all for joining. See you Tuesday night, 9 p.m. And when we're back, it's game week. So everybody have fun, have a good weekend, and go.